This class is going to come from Leviticus, the 26th chapter. We'll start with verse 1, which is last week's end of the last week's portion. And then we'll read and we'll deal with the subject matter, 3 words to change your life. And it's going to come out of this particular pasha, Bechukotai. And let's start with chapter 26, verse 1. It says, "Do not construct idols for yourselves, or set up carved images or pillars for yourselves, or place a bowing stone in your land to bow down to. For I am the Lord, I am your God. Keep my Shabbos days and have fear for my holy house. I am the Lord." That is the end of Bahar. It ends with a very strong admonition to the people of God to run away, have nothing to do with idolatry. As a matter of fact, the Haftorah portion this week deals with some words, very prophetic words that Hashem deals with through the prophet. It says that the land that I have given you also has pitfalls. And those pitfalls are the former places of idolatry, worship of idolatry. And those places will always tempt you to go back and to reconstruct those altars. And he reminds them that there will always be that negative inclination that will somehow beckon them and test them. Hashem lets us know very clearly that the reason why idolatry or paganism, other religions, are out there, and that there will be other people who will claim to have the great knowledge of God, but be a different, will not be true. We know by the sages of blessed memory that these have been put in place to test us, to test our veracity, to test our faithfulness. It would be tantamount to a man being married to his wife and could say, "I've always been faithful to you." But she knows that he's never ever been tempted because no one's ever came to him and tempted him. You understand? It's like, you've not really accomplished much. You've never been tempted. You know, that's not a big deal. It's like the guy that finds $1 million and immediately goes and reports the $1 million and turns it over. And when he gets to Shemaim, he stands before the judgment. He says, "I returned $1 million. Don't I get some credit for it?" And Hashem says, "No, you don't get credit for it because you never were tempted with money. You were never tempted. It'd be like sand to you. It doesn't mean anything to you. How could that be a great mitzvah for you? You didn't struggle through it." It is your tikkun. It is your tikkun, absolutely beyond a shadow of a doubt. If it's easy for you, then it's really not a mitzvah. I mean, you just do it because you do it. But if you struggle with your mitzvah, then it's a great tikkun, it's a great mitzvah for you. So why did Hashem have them take a land which was full of idolatry and idolatrous practices? Number one, that land belonged to Hashem. It was God's land. Number two, he did not want idol worshiping. He didn't want paganism. He didn't want people who were worshiping other gods in that land. The reason why all of the nations that were in the land of Israel before Israel came there, the reason why they were booted out was because of their idolatrous practices. If they were not practicing idolatry, they were allowed to stay, very simply. The issue is that's his land, and everything that is conducted in that land will be conducted for Kadush Hashem, the holiness, sanctification of God's name. So he reminds them in the last part of Parshas Behar, do not construct idols for yourself, or set up carved images or pillars for yourself, or place a bowing stone in your land to bow down to, for I am the Lord your God. And then he says to keep the Shabbos. So what is he saying here? Before he gets into this next portion, he reminds them that if you will do these 3 things, be focused on these 3 things, the rest of these challenges that come to you to keep my commandments and to do my mitzvot will become much, much clearer and easier to do. If you're not confusing yourself with idolatrous practices, you're going to understand the wisdom of God's Torah. If you're not bowing to other gods, but you actually are humbling and submitting yourself to Hashem, then you will not have a problem ever doing Hashem's will. And number three, if you remember His Shabbos, His holy days, those holy days belong to Hashem. It's when we actually actively commit ourselves to connecting to Hashem on His holy days. He's saying, if you'll do these three things, you'll do okay. You're going to do fine. But then He comes into chapter 3, and He says this. If you accept the authority of my laws and keep my commandments and execute them, I will supply your rains in their time. He goes on for a long description of the blessings and curses that will come upon the people of God if they do the things that they're supposed to do, and if they turn away. Somebody have the Chumash portion. Would you please read verse 3 and 4 for me? Just read real loud.
If you will follow my decrees and observe my commandments and perform them, then I will provide you rains in their time, and the land will give its produce, and the tree of the field will give its fruit.
Follow. What's the second one? Read it again. Observe and perform. Why does this seem a little bit redundant?
No.
It's not. It sounds like it, but it's not redundant at all. As a matter of fact, these are three specific focuses that an individual has to have to actually avoid doing what he says that will bring curses into your life. He says, if you will accept this, then you will follow, you will observe, and you will perform. Now let's look, what is follow, observe, and perform? If you think of following, how do we follow the Creator of the universe? We don't see Him. Where is He at? We know He walks among us, according to the sages of blessed memory say that Hashem walks with us. We walk with Him. But what does it mean when it says we are to follow Him? Meaning, say again? His attributes, absolutely. It's even more specific than that, and that is you discover His attributes through the study of Torah. You actually are leaving your place and doing tshuva, right? What does it mean to go from one place to the other? What did God tell Abraham to do? Lech lecha. Go from this place and go find yourself. So in essence, following Hashem means to lech lecha, means never being satisfied with where you're at this point, always striving to reach a place to where you can connect to Hashem on a serious level. Next would be the observing. Before I go into observing and performing, I would like to tell this story. It says that the Mittler Rebbe was sent on a mission by his father, and he had to spend Shabbos in a small town on his way. And the Hasidim in the town were happy to be able to host such a great man. And they carefully watched every movement that he made. And to their amazement, when the Mittler Rebbe was reading this portion, he fainted. And so, of course, all of the men ran to him, and they're thinking he had some major health crisis. They asked, do you want us to call a physician? And they revived him, gave him some water. He says, no, I'm fine. I just fainted. Because when I read what the curses entail, it caused so much fear that it is as if I've read it for the first time. At some level, when we read this, it should cause panic to hit us. Now, the nations aren't held to this standard. It is the Jewish people that is held to this standard. However, if the Jewish people are not doing what they are supposed to do, we pay the price too. Right? It's not just the Jewish people that suffer with having no rain. Of course, we're not having that problem in Texas right now, but having no rain, right? When Israel is not prospering, the nations are not going to prosper. And in many aspects, we can point to some very positive things that Israel has accomplished in its very short new life that has happened since it became a state again, a nation. And you could say, well, because the deserts are flourishing, because they're sending aid to Nepal and they're doing amazing things, that they obviously are doing some things right. They're doing some things pretty good, because if not, it would be horrible. But at the same time, we have to remember Hashem pays measure for measure. I want you to think about it. He pays measure for measure, meaning that what you do will have a direct effect on what you receive. Period. Measure for measure. If you put the earnest effort into study of Torah, you put earnest effort into observing the Torah, more than just observing but performing it, then He for measure will match your midot, your character, that you approach Torah and your love for Hashem. He'll match that. One asked a question, and I'll get back to our story. One asked the question, why is it when I did tshuva, everything became harder? Right? Say again? Well, what I mean by become harder, I should have been more clear. You're correct about that. What I'm saying, why did life become more difficult? Why did it seem that my relationship with my spouse became more intense? My relationship with others seemed to be ratcheted up another level. Why is it that it seemed like I'm struggling with my finances? Well, the sages of blessed memory let us know that Jewish people cannot be Jews without a struggle. That's your tikkun, right? And if you think that you don't want the struggle, then you are asking Hashem to allow you to not struggle in this life, but to struggle in the world to come. And I don't think you want to struggle in that place. So what does the sages of blessed memory say? They say you should relish the idea that you go through these difficulties, because this is your tshuva. This is your suffering. This is your hell. This is the hell that you're going to go through. And I would trade this kind of hell all day than 1 millisecond of discomfort in spiritual darkness and being separated from Hashem. When this Rebbe said that he was not sick and he just simply fainted because he was shocked by the severity of the words of the Torah, this is true chesedim. This is truly a chesed. We know very clearly, it says that the wisdom, the fear of God is the beginning of wisdom, right? The fear of Hashem. If we do not believe that He does what He says He's going to do, then these things don't matter, and it doesn't matter anyway. But as people of the nations who have taken the yoke of Torah, you realize now more than ever that if we want to truly change not only our world by our level of observance, but to change the whole world, we have to encourage the Jewish people to become real Jews, authentic Jews. I saw, my daughter actually brought it to my attention, an organization, a Christian missionary organization that is working overtime and spending millions of dollars to convert Jews to Christianity. And I wanted to say this today and put it on tape so that others can hear this. I do believe that Christians, the Christian people, are very sincere, and they do love Israel and they do love the Jewish people. But like a child that doesn't appreciate the delicacy, the power of how they can overhandle a pet and kill it, Christians do not realize that by encouraging Jews to forsake the Torah, that they are bringing curses upon the Jewish people. And the reason why that they don't see that is not because they are being nefarious about the whole thing. They're so ignorant about the Torah that they don't realize that these laws still are in action and still in play. If you'll go through, and I wish we had the time today to see all of the examples. For example, says, those who kill with the sword will not pass through your land. He talks about the peace. You'll have peace in your land. And when you look at this, you realize they for sure are not experiencing this. Matter of fact, the people with the sword are chasing them down, right? Wanting to destroy them. And we see what happens when they don't follow the commandments. What's happened is we have a society in Israel of modern Israelis who are so secular, and now the Christian missionary organizations are preying upon these secular people to bring them even further out of any connection to their Judaism by handing them a triune deity, an idol, and then say, take your idol and join me, and also remember all those Torah laws are not anymore applicable to you. You don't have to do them. You don't have to pray 3 times a day. You don't have to wash your hands before your meal. As a matter of fact, you don't even have to do all these laws. As long as you have JC in your life, Jesus Christ in your life, you've got it all. And what they don't realize is that the waters of cursing is boiling up in the land. And if those who would listen to this video and watch this video that are Christians, I would say, test your motives, test the words that come from this parsha, and realize that if you really do love Israel and love the Jewish people, then you will be screaming from the hilltops. It's time to take on the yoke of Torah. It's time for you to walk in levels of observance. It's time for you to follow Hashem, observe His ways, and, last but not least, perform the task. Why do we believe that's so important? Because these words rang so true to us. As I said before, God deals with us measure for measure, responding to us in the manner in which we behave and define our relationship with Him. Rabbi Israel Baal Shem Tov interprets the verse, God is your shadow. Remember me and my shadow. Psalm 121, verse 5. It says, the Almighty allows us to establish the basis and the tone of our relationship with Him and respond in kind just as a person's shadow moves in concert with the person's movements. Man has been given free rein to choose whatever mode of guardianship he wants to define his life. Many may choose the free lunch approach, but then, says the Almighty, you must take a full responsibility as well. If things go awry in your life, if you err and blunder, or even if your circumstances are beyond your control and it's overwhelming you, that's your problem. After all, it was you who decided that is your life. Now, what does this great sage say? God very clearly tells the Israelite people, you are going to determine the quality of your life based on your connection to me. That's it. Pretty simple. Now, what is the Noahide / Ger's responsibility in this? And that is, we need to be the encouragers to the Jewish people. People that you know that are Jewish and may not be observant, may be secular, is to somehow entice them with words of wisdom and words of encouragement that would cause them to become more focused in their Jewish life. Because when the Jewish people do well and they're connected to Hashem, the nations will be blessed. That is what it meant when Abraham Avinu is told by Hashem that your seed will bless the nations. That's what it means. That's how you're going to bless the nations. But how do we shake ourselves from this almost seemingly permanent comatose state in which we think everything is all right because we convince ourselves it's all right. And in reality, we have determined our relationship with Hashem by doing the very minimal things that we have to do. You know, when I look back at the stories that come to us from the great sages of Judaism, from the stories in the Torah, in which we see such quick reaction from Hashem to a particular individual that transgresses the law. And even in some cases, not transgress the Torah, but transgress something within his character that immediately causes God to react to it. And why others can seemingly carry on with their life and Hashem never interacts with them. If you have children, you'll know that this is the case. The child that's closest to you is the child that gets most of you. The child that is closest to you is the child that gets the most of you. Good, bad, or indifferent. When you're upset, when you're annoyed, when you're happy, they know. They're right there with you the whole time. The child that's always up in their room watching TV and doesn't even want to engage with the family has no clue what you're like. You see, we should count it a tremendous, tremendous honor to be standing with the Jewish people at Mount Sinai. Our souls possibly stood with the Garim that were there. They heard the same words that we just read. And the Garim there with the people of God also realized that it is my duty to be the rear guard. I have to make sure that when they get sent outside the camp, that I'm able to get them back in the camp as soon as possible, to encourage them, to house them, to clothe them, to make sure they're taken care of. So the job of those within the nations that have the yoke of Torah upon us is to encourage the Jewish people to walk by the commandments. When we look at the next two words of the three words, first one was follow, second one is observe. What does it mean to observe? To watch, to pay attention, right? It's not like sitting down and vegetating in front of a TV. That's not observing. I don't even know what you call that. It's not watching. Actually, it's something's happening. You are looking at every particular nuance of His Torah and my relationship with Hashem. The reason why personal prayer is so important is it causes you to spend time thinking about your relationship with the Creator. If you don't, and we're living in a society where it's very difficult to do that because of iPhones and Facebook and everything else. It keeps us just so tied up and busy. And I saw a great comment from a rabbi to someone who said, "What is hitbadadut?" And he was very succinct, very pithy, but I like the way he said it. He says, turn off all your electrical items, put them in another room, turn off all distractions, get alone with Hashem, and think. Think about your relationship with Him, and think about what He thinks about your relationship with Him. And then begin to rectify the things between you and Him and make it right. Do tshuva. That is personal prayer. Why is it so important? Because it takes your following, because if you'll notice, follow, observe, and perform is a progression, right? There's a lot of people that will go, and I've heard this, well, you got to understand, I'm religious in my heart. God knows my heart, right? Sure, they might be at some level observing or watching or following. Maybe they do some things to follow. Maybe they go to Yom Kippur. Maybe they attend some high holy days. Maybe they do Shabbaton or Sabbath meals with their families. But in reality, they haven't carried it through to the fullest extent. You see, if I follow and observe and perform, this is a progression of my actions. You cannot perform without observing. You cannot observe if you have not followed. Does that make sense? So this whole process, Hashem was not being redundant. What He is telling you, there's a process. First you follow, meaning you have to put one foot in front of the other. Meaning that you are not going to be in the place that you were. Okay, and I've said this forever, if you're the same person now as you were last year, you've not gone anywhere, right? So what does that mean? That I should have a greater connection with Hashem. I mentioned to Rabbi Salman Weiss the other day about desire and satisfaction. You know, having such a strong desire for connection with Hashem and being satisfied. And I said, I don't know that I'll ever be satisfied. I don't know if I'll ever be. And he said, Baruch Hashem, I hope you're never satisfied. Because if you become satisfied in your relationship with Hashem, you're probably not keeping pace with Him. You've probably decided you have what you need and you don't need any more. So this whole idea of following, observing, and performing is a process. That process of following means that each step he takes, every breath he makes. There's a song that goes this way. Isn't that Hashem singing that to us? I'll be watching you? Yeah. So that's where they got it from. So you are walking with Hashem. You are sensitive. If He shows you something in a new page of the Torah, you're very careful to observe what this is. It's not a watching. You're not a spectator. This observation is part of your critical thinking process. As an investigator, observation was a powerful tool in solving crime. Very powerful tool. And sometimes just looking over all of the data that you have and observing the process and going through the intellectual exercise to look at the data and look at the facts and look at the evidence, that observation finally allows you the ability to perform your job. And so what do I mean is by observing the Torah as a study of Torah, but it's more than just reading font and ink. As a matter of fact, you can read the Torah and the Tanakh, the Gemara all day long, but if there's not an intellectual observation of every element, every nuance of the words and the concepts that are brought down by the sages, then you'll never be able to get into the performance stage. Why is it important? Because performance is tied to knowing what to do. I can't do something if I don't know how to do it. And what a beautiful lesson that we learn that teaches us the power of doing what Hashem asks us to do. Now, in closing, I would like to say, or warn us, I guess, because when you read the rest of this portion this week, and you see that he said he would cause the fruit on the trees to dry up, the seed, you will plant seed, and the enemy will come and snatch it out of the ground. I mean, it is just an absolute, almost banal existence. Without Hashem, there is nothing. It had to be that strong. It had to be that strong before His people could actually see the necessity of not falling into idolatry and to constantly stay in step with the Creator of the universe. The relationship they have is so unique, and that is this. Sure, the nations get blessed when they do just things. When they follow the Sheva Mitzvot and they establish courts of justice, they enjoy great blessings. But it is the Jewish people that receive a unique blessing and a unique curse, not because they're not great people, they're fantastic people. But when you don't follow, when you don't observe, and when you don't perform, there is no chance that prosperity will come. As a matter of fact, measure for measure, He will increase it. He says, I will increase your misery sevenfold. Sevenfold. As soon as I read that, chills ran up my spine, and what I pictured was people walking into gas chambers. Says it 3 different times. Absolutely. It repeated over and over. When I think of the Inquisitions, of rabbis having their flesh clawed off of them and put in torturing devices to get them to convert, say that they will convert. What happened? Where was the neshama of the Jewish people at that time? Sure, they were righteous, but you understand the whole idea is that, yes, they were righteous in the Jewish people, but something happened to the majority of the Jewish people at the time that brought on misery beyond compare. I had one person tell me that's a B'nai Noach that considered converting, decided not to do it because of these words. Because they felt like, I don't think I want to have to deal with that. I don't want to have to deal with that kind of judgment. But at the same time, what a blessing it is when you do know Hashem and walk with Him. And I think that many of you, I talked to one individual, just a prince of a guy from the UK that is B'nai Noach, he and his wife, and he's thinking about converting. And he says, the reason why is I feel like that I'm the guy that's sitting on the sidewalk looking through the window. And he says, I just can't stand outside and look through the window anymore. I said, I understand that. I think there's a lot of people that feel that way. But I said, at the same time, there are a lot of people who are B'nai Noach who are quite fine with that and are having a wonderful life. And they're blessed beyond compare because they're actually doing more than they're required to do, right? So, to wrap it up, 3 things that we should be encouraging our Jewish friends and neighbors to do as B'nai Noach is to follow and observe and to perform mitzvah. The second thing we do is encourage them by our love for Hashem and showing them how we follow after Hashem, how we observe the Torah mitzvot, and how we perform the things that God has given us to do. And when we do this, not only do we secure our world that we're in for ourselves individually, for our families, for our children, but we also secure a better place for all the people in the nations. Several times in this text, he said that if you will do these things, you will have peace. You'll have peace. What kind of peace? There's so many different levels to shalom, right? There's shalom bayit, there's shalom in your home. There is peace within your relationships with your family, your friends, peace in relationship with those within your community. But at the same time, he says that if you don't do it, you will find no peace. You couldn't find it if you wanted to. And what is so beautiful, if you look into an observant Jewish home and see the atmosphere of peace, think of Rabbi Wobi and his children in their home, to see how that looks, to see how they perform the mitzvahs in front of their children, and see that, I don't know, there's just a different attitude and character in these children that are raised in an observant home. And it's an incredible blessing and encouragement for us to try to do that ourselves with our own grandchildren and children.